we call it a dialogue for a reason. We've had way too many talk shops. The time for talk shops has ended. And so what we want to do tonight, and we have a fantastic group of people, thought leaders, activists, business people, change makers. And what we want to do this evening is three things. And the first is, let's have a conversation, and from that conversation, develop research that we can actually expand on, firstly. Secondly, advocacy. So this State of the Nation is not about us being spoken at, which is this terrible culture that we have in our country. 30 years after democracy, we are still having a one-way discussion with our policymakers and our leaders. This has got to stop. The two-way conversation needs to start today, and it starts with us. And so advocacy means engaging each other today and using this opportunity to engage our policymakers later on. And that means lobbying people, our politicians, right from our ward councillors all the way up to provincial and national government. That's the second one, advocacy. And the third one is policy. Now, our president's thrown in a lot of different policies into the State of the Nation. Do we know what those policies are? Have they impacted our lives? And how have they done so? And how do we actually measure that impact? And so as your policy and research chair for the Black Management PRC, we're going to be taking all the outcomes from this dialogue today in partnership with Henley and making a difference in our society. You know the famous saying, we are the change we want to see. So let's be that change. And on that note, I'd like to welcome our very gracious host, Professor John Foster Pedley, who is the Vice Chancellor of this fantastic organization that we are in today. He's also the Director and Dean for Henley Business School, to formally welcome us to Henley.
Thank you very much. So just to set the record straight, I'm not actually a professor here. I have a distinguished professorship for an Indian university. So I do get away with being called professor sometimes, but in reality, I'm not. Yeah, so, you know, leave that to the boffins, you know. But thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate you sharing time here at Henley. I mean, we have a vision at Henley, which is we build the people who build the businesses that build Africa, and businesses and institutions as well. And the reason we have that is I remember sitting and looking out of one of those windows over there, and I visualized in my own head the Gini coefficient in South Africa, the distortion of wealth, how so much wealth is in so few hands, and so how little wealth is in so many hands. And I thought to myself, well, how on earth do you possibly build a country with that? And forget the rights and wrong, the moral rights and wrong, the history, even just pragmatically, how can that work? And it can't work. It's impossible to build South Africa with those distortions. So we've got to have an equalization of opportunity, of income, of capability, and just to start believing in ourselves that we can do that on the one hand. On the other hand, we have to have an absolute, I don't know, a strength and a determination to not allow things to go the wrong way. A lot of us have kids. We all have kids all at schools. We want to do something for them and their grandchildren. That's why we're here. It's not about us grandstanding. We've got a duty. And so that's tough. That comes with pain and penalties and abuse and threats, but you still got to do it because that's who we are. So Henley Business School believes in this. And for that reason, we are absolutely privileged to have Black Management Forum, our guests here, and you to discuss the State of the Nation address and what we might collectively think and do about it to improve South Africa and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll refrain from calling you professor.
Call me what you want.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome on stage our Deputy President for the Black Management Forum, Ms. Lily Moabi, to provide BMF's remarks.
How do I stand in front of such giants, such mindset? Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm sure you can do much better than that. Good evening.
Good evening.
Are we all good? Welcome to the post-SONA discussion. Let me start, of course, by acknowledging Program Director Thank you very much, Doc. You are a real doctor. So we're definitely proud of you, and we know that you will MC this event fantastically. Thank you very much. Let me also welcome Henley. Thank you very much. Prof, as always, the support, we really acknowledge it. And by the way, guys, BMF and Henley is one family. So we have officially been adopted in the family. The panel members, thank you so much for availing yourselves to be part of this interesting discussion. All the distinguished guests and of course the BMF members, welcome. MD and the President in his absence, welcome and thank you very much for this opportunity and putting together this event. So when we look at the 2026 State of Nation Address, what we saw was that it was more than a government update. It was a moment of reflection for us as South Africans to see the progress that we have done and the challenges that we are facing as a country. While our president acknowledged that the economy is showing signs of recovery, we all know that growth alone is not enough. But here's the critical question. Who is participating in this growth that we are talking about? Who leads the growth? Who benefits from this growth? As the BMF, this question goes to the heart of our mission as an organization. So I'm going to summarize into 4 points what I think is important that we need to talk about and make sure that we break each point and understand what the president was talking about. The first one, economic growth and inclusion. We all heard that government committed to accelerating infrastructure, investment, reforming logistics, energy, strengthening economic performance. All of these are supposed to create opportunities. But who are these opportunities for? Are we as Black professionals and Black-owned businesses, are we benefiting from these opportunities? Infrastructure, we heard about roads, we heard about rail, but what did we hear about building Black industrialists? Energy reforms, which the president expanded on, need to not only focus on stabilizing the supply, but are the spaces open for Black participation from generation and innovation? Are we partaking as Black individuals and Black businesses? When we talk about economic recovery, we must translate it into meaning inclusion at executive and ownership level. Is that really happening? Then we move over to transformation. And we are all happy that day the president reaffirmed our support for BBBEE, which was quite important as we know that it is under attack in the country as we stand. But are we really progressing? Or are we still in that compliance mode? Do we really have real authority as the Black people in the transformation of this country, or are we just participating as a tick box? As Black leaders, as a Black Management Forum organization, we must ensure that all these policies that the government has put in place deliver measurable impact and sustainable wealth, as well as creation. Then the third one was governance, crime, and ethical leadership. And I'm putting all these three together because they are so connected. The fight against crime, corruption, and illegal economic activity was emphasized. Who are these people that are committing the crime? It's people that are hungry, that are unemployed. And then we speak about ethical leadership. We want to blame these people that are committing the crime, but what about those that are stealing millions in the boardroom? What are we saying about them? We all know that crime weakens the economy, but what about corruption? Doesn't corruption undermine transformation? Poor governance limits investor in confidence and growth, but can you really blame the guy that's stealing bread? What about that corporate leader who is sitting in the boardroom and stealing millions, not even a loaf of bread? As the BMF, it's important that we continue to champion ethical leadership, both in government, in business, and each one of us individually in our ranks. Transformation without integrity will never last. It will never endure. Lastly, investing in the next generation. Youth unemployment, we all heard the stats, one of our greatest national challenge. But we all know that policy alone will never solve it. So how are we going to solve it? In this room, we have entrepreneurs, we've got executives, we've got intellects, professors, we've got people studying for their masters. What are we doing to create paths for other young people to come up into leadership? What are we doing to expand internships and make sure that we give young people an opportunity to have work experience? How are we investing in skills aligned to the digital and the global economy? If we want to sustain transformation, it's very important that we prepare the next generation of leaders today so that we can change the trajectory of tomorrow. We cannot just sit here and observe and every year listen to the SONA speech but do absolutely nothing about it. We are the architects of economic change. As the BMF, we have to influence this policy, strengthen the governance, and ensure that transformation translates into real economic power for South Africans. So as I conclude, we all know that South Africa at the moment is at a defining moment. Economic transformation and reform is underway. There is infrastructure investment of over 1 trillion that was committed by the government into public infrastructure investment, which is the largest allocation in South African history. But are we going to benefit from it? We know that we have over 5 South African investment conferences that were held, which raised up to 1.5 trillion. But are we feeling it? Are we seeing the impact? There is a new target that was launched of 2 trillion into new investment to be raised over the next 5 years. Is that money going to go into the commissions, or is it really going to make a difference? The address spoke about 2.5 million jobs and livelihood opportunities that are created by what is called the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program. But we just heard the unemployment stats. Are these two speaking to each other? We all celebrated a couple of months ago South African schools achieving 88% matric pass rate. Apparently, that's the highest in the country's history. Where are those young people? How many of them are in universities now as we speak? How many of them are sitting at home? How will we ultimately measure the success of this administration? It can't be based on plans and policies. We've been there since 1994. The success of this administration will be judged, number 1, by job creation and reduced unemployment. We want to see improved living conditions. We want to see service delivery. We want water. We want electricity, reliable supply, safety, safer communities, restored economic growth. We want our businesses to be funded, to be active, and they must grow. And most importantly, renewed public trust and hope. And I know each one of us is here because we have hope that this country will change. But that hope must be seen in everything that we do every day. Coincidentally, as the BMF, we are also celebrating 50 years of existence. And we all know that BMF was founded on the principle that economic participation is fundamental to dignity and freedom. Transformation, ladies and gentlemen, is not a government project. It is a leadership obligation. History will not remember the BMF on how many post-SONA discussions we've had, but history will remember what we built as an organization. It will remember whether we change, number one, the economy, and number two, the structure and the opportunities of Black people in this country. So today, as we have this discussion, let it not just be a response based on SONA, let it be a true reflection of how we can shape the next 50 years of BMF, whether under this administration or not. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy President. And as the Deputy President correctly highlighted, we're here for the post-SONA. So we're going to conduct a post-mortem in the hope that we're going to identify how this patient died and prevent further deaths. And on that note, I have the great pleasure of introducing our esteemed panelists for the evening. You've already met the person who doesn't want to be referred to as Professor, Professor John Foster Pedley, who's a prominent British South African academic business leader and former airline pilot. Perhaps you could give us some comments, some suggestions on how to fix our national carriers. He's also
no problem.
Fantastic. We're looking forward to that. And also Dean and Director of Henley Business School. We also have, right next to John, the esteemed Dr. Tabia Cheshane, who's a prominent South African transformation specialist, leadership coach, and advocate for inclusion in the workplace. She's also a steward in Values 20, someone I have great respect for. We're really privileged to have you this evening, Doctor. And equally privileged to have Miss Palisa Nkoma with us. Many of you already know her, prominent South African development economist, social justice activist, and feminist leader. I mean, she just has a whole shopping list, directory even, of accolades to her name. But I'm just going to highlight the ones that relate to us for this evening, which is she's currently a board chairperson on Oxfam. She founded the Abantu for Global Equity organization. She's also a co-founder of Women's Economic Assembly and Commissioner for Gender Equality. And she holds a number of other memberships, colleagues. So what I've done for this evening is split the SONA up in sections so that we can interrogate them according to those sections. And the most critical ones we have, of course, is business or the lack of business development in our country, which is the way we address unemployment, right, and inequality. Markets being highly, highly concentrated 30 years after democracy. And so we need to address that if we're going to achieve an equitable and inclusive economy. And speaking to that, of course, is John, who raised the Gini coefficient earlier. We need entrepreneurship to bring equality. And the second one will be social issues. And I don't think there's anyone better placed to discuss that than Sis Palisa, having covered issues on women and youth. And of course, women and youth being the most marginalized segments of our population. And of course, Sis Tabia to cover employment or the lack of employment in our economy. By a show of hands, friends, today, how many of you have played the board game Monopoly? Great. So, you know, when you roll the dice, you get a number and you take your little boot, or what was it, a hat, and you go on the board. Sis Palisa, I'd like to ask you, whenever we listen to these SONA addresses, our politicians start by invoking the names of our political activists and ancestors, Helen Suzman, Lillian Ngoyi. Is this their attempt at a get-out-of-jail-free card? Are we supposed to be distracted by the liberation movement and the successes of our ancestors from the failures of our economy and of our society at the moment?
Well, I mean, you can also, I think that's a fair reflection. But also the other side of it is that they always feel it's important for them to reflect on where this country comes from and acknowledge those who had come before them. It's true, though, that, remember, invoking the brand equity of those who had put their lives for this country is actually, its staying power is not long if there is no concomitant support of what they stood for versus what the deliverables are. So, and I do think that sometimes politicians don't pay attention to it. I mean, even the Mandela brand is often invoked as often as possible, where people will, do some quotes, without thinking that actually South Africans are looking for the equitable or the equity promise that is enshrined in the Constitution. Build a society where citizens equally enjoy access to healthcare, access to education, access to economic opportunities, but also fully becoming productive citizens, where they're able to make choices about where they are. So in the South African context, for instance, Africans are not able to make choices. And I'm just saying particularly Africans. We're confronted with a second wave, if not third wave, of economic migration. We're sitting at 69.1% of urbanization in South Africa. 69.1%. Gauteng alone, in 1993, we had 3.8 citizens. We're sitting now at 15.2 million. Now you can imagine the crisis that Gauteng is going to be confronted with. So Gauteng's GDP is also declining. In early 90s, it was sitting at 40%. It's just below 30% now. So you can see, so earlier before I came to this meeting, I mean, I just had a bit of a disturbing meeting with we're sitting with a Harvard Growth Lab. They are reflecting on the sectors of the economy that are working in South Africa. So in 1994, we actually had, on average, about 16 to 18 sectors of the economy that were working. So, and our industrial capability was sitting at about 49%, 51%. This was 1994. And this was when South Africa was excluded from trading with other countries. We're now sitting at 19%. So meaning that in simple terms, 81% of everything that we consume in this country does not come from South Africa. Now, so Deputy Chair, I really like the point that you are making, that transformation is not about a sitting government. But I just want to coin that and say structural transformation is not about sitting with government. Basic issue is, do you know in South Africa there are only 2 companies that manufactures these bottles? We import them. So the key issue is, what are we committed to? Are we committed to be executives, or are we committed to truly make a difference, right? Retail sector, we are still on the back to school now. The shirts, the school shirts, the grey pants that our children wear, the jerseys, the shoes, where do they come from? They come from another country unto which is industrial surplus. We buy it, we support it. Yeah. So you tell me, when you are in a position of power as a BMF member, how do you use that power and say, I'm actually going to purchase from Manmadlamini in Soweto, who actually can do a white shirt. In fact, I am willing to be inconvenienced and get into my Porsche and drive to Soweto, where I'm likely to smell because there's no collection of proper, right? We don't want to be inconvenienced as Black people. You want to hop into your car, walk into a mall, and go out. So you can never achieve structural transformation without being inconvenienced. Because that inconvenience comes with the part of it, there's a premium that you have to pay. Amongst those is, be willing to pay 20 Rand extra from Mama Dlamini than, because remember, if you're in middle class, and I'm just going to use middle class for the sake of our conversation, because we know that we don't have middle class, by the way, right? But I don't want to go into that academic conversation. Prof is better placed with that. So, but the key issue is that if, for instance, at least you have the purchasing power, right, to buy, amongst the key things you need to be able to do is to say, if I support local SMMEs, okay, and I'm willing to pay 20 Rand, 30 Rand extra, because in fact, working class people are more price sensitive. Do you understand what I'm saying? So my younger sister who's unemployed and the cousin, so price sensitive. If they have to buy Aromat, let me just give Aromat a free advert, because I know almost all our houses have Aromat. So, but they will look at what are these new brands where I can save 3 Rand, 4 Rand, etc. But at the same time, if, for instance, there's somebody else who's a black person who manufactures Aromat, we must pay attention and say, where is it coming from? So our consumption patterns, we are such blind consumers who are not only price sensitive, in fact, price sensitive, but there's something that is quite interesting with our over price sensitive. We're willing to catch a flight and go and do shopping in Turkey and buy clothes and flood this market and kill the whole local textile industry. Yeah. Now, here's the key issue, which I think BMF does well, but you don't use you have such a powerful political convening power in this country. In the 50 years, by the way, I'm 50, so I want to come into 50th celebration. So I'm already getting myself a seat. You have such a powerful political convening power to do what is called economic mobilization. This country has done exceptionally well on political mobilization. In fact, in this country, you can have political conversation at home, even with your grandfather who's not educated, but he knows what political party that I must vote for and why it's the reason. So it means that we've done well. But can we have this economic conversation in our families? I mean, what type of choices? Deputy Chair, you make the point about celebrating 88% pass, right? What type of subjects have our children chosen? Mathematics literacy. We are sitting with math lit specialists who are younger generation. And the basic issue we're missing is that pure maths, one of the basic skills that it gives you an ability to solve a problem. It gives you resilience to solve a problem with all the 12 steps that you have to go through. And if we are doing shortcuts in the way we do shortcuts with how we spend our money, we're doing shortcuts in how we spend on education, the consequences that when all of us here are old and frail, you must look at the quality of decision-making that's going to be coming through. It's going to be linked to the quality of education that we're investing in today.
Thank you, Sis Belisa. And I'd like to bring you in there, John, if I may. Sis Belisa raised a number of issues and a call to action in terms of how we can develop our economy as normal constituents in this republic. Purchasing power. We vote with our rands. She also raised the issue of public service delivery failings, right? We don't have refuse removal, water, electricity supply in our lower socioeconomic areas, which is impacting entrepreneurship. And the third issue you raised is built in both structural and systemic oppression in the economy. Given your vast experience in training entrepreneurs, and quite brilliantly, I'm sure we can all agree, how can we address all of these things in South Africa?
Well, one of the things we teach people is system thinking.
We need
and understanding systems is that there are many symptomatic problems. This works, right? I've got this. Okay. We've got, you've got a lot of symptomatic problems. Things you can, I've got a problem here, let's cure that, let's cure that, let's cure that. But a lot of those are symptoms of something deeper. And so we can spend a lot of time talking about this or this or this, each of which are really, really important. And when it comes to entrepreneurs, you've got, I ran an incubator in New Zealand for a while. It was fascinating. I can talk about that. It's not an easy problem. You have to understand the difference between lagging measures and leading measures. And a lagging measure is like profit. That comes from something. You can measure profit. What you want to measure is the things that got you to profit in the first place. And there are multiple things in that. There are systemic things in organizations, but at the heart of it, and the heart of transformation is that however you shuffle the deck chairs on a ship, you don't want that ship to be the Titanic and a sinking ship. And what makes the difference between a sinking ship, in my view, and a ship that floats is the capability of the people in the roles running things. So while I agree with local purchasing, I think that's a really, really important thing to do, and I agree with everything you're saying as problems. I think if you look a little deeper, and you look at what's happened in South Africa over the last 40 years or so, we've had an attrition of education in this country. When you look at Singapore, Korea, Vietnam, those places, what they've done is dedicated themselves to educating people, not just in maths lit, but in STEM subjects. And not just in STEM subjects also, but in subjects that generate innovation. And so that and in management, and in governance and leadership and in ethical management. Because the one problem you have in a country, and it could be in any country, not just here, but if you've invested in educating an entrepreneur so they understand they have the psychological resilience, they know about businesses, they know about creating value, they know about how to engage with people, they know how to manage their books, they know how to sell, by the way, which is a massive thing. That's all very well, but unless you're in a systemic environment that supports them, they're not going to succeed. And unless you put people like that, give them the opportunity to grow, you'll never get the economy changing. And if you allow deployment of people into jobs that haven't got capabilities for political reasons, if you allow people to be put into significant jobs because they're somebody's friend or family, if you allow people to win tenders because they are somebody's connection, you're getting this amount of money filtered away by a whole lot of money that's disappeared. I used to sell airplanes in Africa and the Middle East, so I have a very good insight into the heart of the beast, let me tell you. Okay, I really do. And so what happens is you end up with organizations populated by people who do not know how to build things, make things, use money well, who are distributing this, and you end up with a shrinking. And who suffers? Well, the taxpayer suffers, of course, but the real people who suffer are your children, you, who've invested years and years of your life to get the skills that can run a real business and a real organization and not given a chance to do so. So if you don't allow those people to give them a context where they can thrive, you cannot have transformation that endures, that is not just shuffling deck chairs on a Titanic, because it's only capability, skills, the ability to do things really, really well and run complex businesses in a difficult international world, you know, with complicated consumer, and in South Africa with partial support for entrepreneurs anyway, both in government, but both in the market too, you're not going to succeed. So I think systemically we have to think really what are the key drivers we have to look at? And education is one. And the second thing is, do we believe in ourselves? And if you believe in people properly, you educate them. And we have wonderful evidence of thousands of people that we've educated, 13,033 graduates, you know, going from 30% black now to 85% black, and from 20% women to 55% women on all our programs who are taking exams internationally, you know, international thing with international moderation. And they are passing as well, if not better, than the British, the Danish, the French, the Malaysians, whatever. And these are South Africans. And I don't think we believe in ourselves enough. And I think if you believe, you will give the education, you will clear the space for the entrepreneurs to grow, and you'll be quite ruthless about corruption. You won't talk about corruption as being a white-collar thing. Corruption is organized criminality. You know, a municipality that's been hijacked is not delicate white-collar crime. It is organized crime in a municipal suit, and that's what it is. And those are the changes we can make. They're the hardest ones, but they're the ones, in my view, that will make the difference and allow South Africa and entrepreneurs to grow.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So, John, you underscored 2 points that would lead to long-term economic growth, and I'd like to bring you in now, Sister Bia, is education and employment. And you've been at the forefront of of those things, of growing talent in our country. And if we look at the SONA, we see an over-reliance on government to create jobs, right? We're talking about the presidential initiative. We're talking about expanded public works programs. We have one of the most bloated public services in the world. I mean, I was looking at, we've got 70 cabinet ministers, which cost us a packet, by the way, taxpayers. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. 70 compared to about 37 in China, where they have a population of over 1 billion. Is this sustainable?
Absolutely not. I don't think that the role of government is to create jobs. It's to create an enabling environment for jobs to be created. And it's almost as if there's a sense of desperation in government to prove that they're doing things without actually doing anything. There's almost a lack of touch with reality as to what the basics are to economic growth, to creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to prosper, and we're just creating these little things that we think we can celebrate that really don't achieve much. If you look at those jobs that we're referring to, that the president referred to, question one, is it sustainable? No. To what extent are those people permanized? Do they still remain in those jobs? We've heard a lot about these teacher assistants. They come there for a season and then they're gone. But the statistics remain there to be reported to us. And when you look at it, it doesn't make a real impact on the economic transformation of the people that have gotten that little bit of money. It's enough to just sustain them for a period. It doesn't create economic empowerment of any form or shape. They're just waiting for the next one. It's the same with the learnerships that are not translating into permanent jobs, where you find people moving from one learnership to the other without really getting jobs that can maintain them. You can't train somebody the same skill over and over again. If you do, then you've got to ask yourself, where's the problem? The problem is in the system, not in the people's inability to learn. And we keep training the same people and taking them through the same process over and over again. And we don't stop to question what is going wrong. We don't interrogate what we could be doing wrong in the system. So as far as I'm concerned, what the president does is all well and good, but how about creating enabling environments for entrepreneurs to can create more jobs for people? Often when people complain about employment equity taking jobs from people, I share with them that to a large extent, people who leave employment because they're disgruntled, a lot of them start their own businesses. It is a good thing. What they do when they've started businesses is that they employ other people. And that's what we need. We also need, talking about education, we need to move from an education that seeks to create employees to creating an education that makes people successful enough to can start their own businesses or to can be prosperous in the roles that they're in, not just, moving the pen, to be really, really prosperous. And I think that's what we need in our country.
Great. And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to that, if I may, because you raised the issue of systemic failure. So we've got systemic failures in our employment policies, and we saw that we didn't see that addressed in the SONA, right? So we were talking about our great matric pass rate without addressing the huge elephant in the room, which is dropout rate, which is around about 60%, right? John was talking about the lack of STEM subject training or passing in our education system. How do we address this? How do we provide our youth with the support that they need so we don't have this phenomenon, and I prefer to call it push-out rate rather than dropout rate, because the system is actually causing this, right? How do we actually address it so that we can see these young people rise and be enabled in the way that you mentioned?
Often when I look at the state of our youth, and the level of apathy, I think that there's something missing at the bottom. I think right down at the education system, you can't want to start talking about skills development without addressing basic education and addressing what the flaws are in our education system. Why are we ending up with a push-out rate? Why is it that people are so eager to drop out of school instead of seeing it through? What is lacking in our education system? And I think a lot of it has to do with the balance that education should create. We create people that regurgitate information, people that are not analytical thinkers, that are not critical thinkers. All they need to do is to cram all this information into their brain and then reproduce it in their exams, and then we celebrate the high pass rate. And part of the problem is that we don't create people who look at situations, or youth that look at their environment and see opportunities. I often say that business is about solving human or environmental problems. And our youth are not even trained to look through the eyes of what are the problems that exist that I can solve. And I think until we get to a space where we critically analyze the education system, instead of moving from one name and acronyms of what it is today to a next set of acronyms, if we can get to a place where we have factual, analytical analysis of what is going wrong, where we can truly interrogate the things that are not working without quickly wanting to find a solution for the next president, we're not going anywhere. We need to be very critical about what's not working in our environments, and we need to interrogate what it is that the mind needs in order to be emancipated, instead of just children walking around with matric certificates saying that they've passed. I truly believe that also the social problems that we have in our country are also, they play a big role in the education failures. There's a school called the Maharishi Institute.
Yeah.
You should go and visit it.
My mates.
When kids come into class, when university students start their day, they start with meditation, where they also, as part of that, unpack their stress that they've left at home, where they deal with their own issues of traumas that they've experienced at home. How do you expect a child to sit in class and really concentrate when they've got this huge baggage of trauma that they've left behind? In fact, they didn't leave it behind. They bring it into the classroom. So we're not addressing the systemic issues around our education. Children that are coming hungry, and we think it's okay for us to just expect for them to learn. So for me, it's unpacking what education means at a broader level than just saying, here's a book, read and write exams.
Thank you very much. And you all sound well marinated now, are you? So I have a whole list of questions, but I think I can ask it offline. We are running out of time, and we did promise a dialogue.
I'm sure we can extend a bit, actually.
We can?
Well, as far as we're concerned, we certainly can extend. It's just whether you need to go home, please go if you need to. But if not, please stay, yeah.
So I think we can open up for a round of questions. We also have people joining us online who have been very patiently waiting for this discussion since 6 p.m. So we want to get their questions as well. And then if time allows, I can return to the questions that I have scheduled. Okay, shall we take the first round? Yes, sir. Okay, we'll take those three and anyone. And there's a gentleman over there in the blue. Please go ahead.
My question's got just a little bit of context. I listened to the State of the Province address last night that Premier Panyaza Lesufe offered for Gauteng, and Cape Town is happening, I think, tomorrow or the day after, State of the Province. Secondly, this morning I had the privilege of listening to Rudy Dix from Operation Vulindlela in the Presidency, addressing Business Leadership South Africa on the state of the city of Joburg and where we're at. And then I also had the privilege of having a chat with my daughters on systemic thinking and on the state of human beings in this country, the family, the identity of the African child, and what it's going to take for us to take that long walk to prosperity. So here's my question, and it's to you, Dr. Tabia, because you set me up down there. Now I'm going to grill you. not grill you for the grill, but to get into your head.
Yeah.
If we understand prosperity and what that means for the African child, what is the state of our preparation of prosperity as a nation? Because I get a sense that we're solving the wrong problems. And we're not solving what I read in that lovely book, Long Walk to Freedom, the prosperity of the African child. What is prosperity and what is required there? Because I didn't hear it from the president, I didn't hear it from Panyaza, I didn't hear it from Rudy Dix, I didn't hear it from anybody. I was hoping today we'd get some light.
Sure.
What he thinks.
I hope my colleagues here could also make an input. I think prosperity means different things to different people. If you look at financial prosperity and you look at what is happening in our country, Julius Malema asked Vusi a very poignant question and said, a lot of youth are looking at you and believe that you're successful. What would you say to them if they asked you how you became successful? Now think about it. Those are the role models that our youth are looking at and they want to be like. They really don't want to be like me driving an SM. That's not what they call prosperity. But for me, prosperity is not only about being able to buy what I need to buy. It's about being able to sleep at night. It's about being able to say to myself, my name is Tabia Tesani, and these are my roots. The richness of having my family and my identity so deeply ingrained in who I am. And if you had to ask me then, what is prosperity? It's being able to inculcate that level of thinking amongst our children, where they have a sense of identity and they stand tall as they say what their names are. White people call me Tabia, but my name is Tabia. And when I introduce myself, I call myself Tabia because that is my name. And I think that to some extent, our children are trying to emulate something that is not who they are. And until we can get to that sense of identity, of dignity in terms of who they are, and moving away from a sense of less than, to a large extent, we're brought up to believe that we're less than, and that we should value things that are defined by society as prosperity. Until we can get to a place where we understand who we are and what grounds us, we'll never be prosperous. The money we have will never be enough. By the way, when Vos Matlala answered, he said, I'm not prosperous yet. I haven't made the type of money I want to make yet. So how much money does he really want to make for him to feel prosperous? Guess what? I feel prosperous. And there are times when my bank account doesn't have much money because I've got healthy children. Their mental well-being is okay. I'm okay. We eat enough. There's enough food in the home. We love family. We grow with people. We have a strong sense of community. And that's what carries us. We walk around and we don't eat in shame because when we eat, we make sure that others eat with us. And that, for me, is prosperity.
Thanks, Doc. Tabia.
Got it right.
I think the key thing that I wanted to start with is what the program director started with. The issue of politicians relating to Mam Lilian Ngoyi and their role. And I think doctor is indirectly responding to it, this thing called identity. Precisely because in an African culture, we have what is called tagazel. And the reason why you will say Naki Kumalo ke mtungwa is because you are relating with your past. And in a way, when you are calling Mtungwa as your past, you are doing it with respect and say, I must do what the Mtungwas have been doing in the past. So the reason why you will have the president saying, Mandela have said, don't ask what the country can do for you, say what you can contribute to the country. It's precisely because what the ancestor of the country stood for, we will love you to stand for what he stood for as an encouragement. So I think one of the biggest things that we made as a plan, and I think academics must help us here. I'm one of the people who still believe that the discipline in our schools, we took a wrong direction because we took the Western culture and installed it in our African culture, which was supposed to be through, scenarios. It was not supposed to be boom, next week, no more corporal punishment. And the kids said, oh, not next week, we have a freedom. And then they responded very correctly. And now we're in big problem because there's no left and right, there's a big problem. So I think the Western culture solution have affected us. And unfortunately, even at the time, it was even worse. Our media, which was SABC by then, whatever that was practicing, it was Western culture. It took time before you can have an African practice on our communication channels. So a lot that we need to do, Prof, relating to the system. We suspended the operation of the system. We didn't end the system. So that's the key thing. But the DP for BMF, I have a good suggestion that I hope BMF will do. What I call, you guys need to have an adoption of an entrepreneur program. Because the reason why entrepreneurs are not functioning is because they lack technical skills, which is your academic assistance for them to do whatever that they've worked on. Now, until the conscious academic individuals of this country play their part on the entrepreneurship development, we will never have change. So that task of changing the entrepreneurs, the only people who are correctly placed to change it is the BMF. Now, if you have a 50-year anniversary, it will be nice to have 50 entrepreneurs per province as part of the 50th and say, we have academics in our data. We're going to put 4 of you as a bookkeeper, as a marketing person, as a concept manager to manage this entrepreneur. And in that context, you colleagues will be able to be relevant in terms of the growth that we are speaking about, because that growth, it won't be able to be successful if there's no role that the BMF, who are supposed to be at the center, are playing their role. So my belief is that you can link the program to the DTI, the APWP, because entrepreneurship is not about funding. It's not about CEDA and IDC. It includes the technical skills. I know, for example, and I'm an entrepreneur, good in concept, but I will tell you, one of my weakest link is the technical part, which sometimes it's killing me. So just think how many of us are going through when we have academics who are doing that. The last part that I want to close on corruption. The truth is that people who are able to do documents of RFQ are not people who have not went to school. The people who are able to plot the APP of government are not people who have not went to school. I've worked in the Premier's office of Gauteng. I've continuously known the public servants, I don't understand what is this thing. They sleep and they wake up corruption. In the morning, someone plans, and these people are senior managers. When you go to them, they become very arrogant to you, they hate you. So, and the truth is that these people, most of them in majority are not politicians, by the way. The only time they do favors it becomes as if it's a politician corruption. It's when, and that's when they leak it, no? It's when they had a plan to give to Tabo, and the politician also had an interest to give it to Mpo, and instead to go to Mpo, and they got angry because they planned on Tabo. I had an assistant director who stayed in Midrand, and I used to ask him, how do you afford this thing? I still stay in the township. How do you afford this thing when you're assistant director and I'm a director? You are getting paid almost 50% less than me, but you live larger than me. And then you claim to be using Gauteng, but weekend you are seen driving a Mercedes-Benz. Now, I will tell you, colleagues, I've read Brother Bond. Until structures like BMF take on its own a program, a special program on corruption, this corruption will not end. Because these people who are doing that corruption, they are indirectly your members. Whether they fill your form or not, the fact of the matter is that they are black managers who are supposed to be your members. So indirectly, they are your members. So there should be an institutional arrangement. But in Gauteng, GPG, can we have managers who are members of BMF, who their task is to do a voluntary intelligence work to report on corruption taking place, whether it's RFQ or scholar transport. We argue to this thing nutrition in Gauteng government. How do you give someone nutrition of 2,000 learners alone? It would have been nice to give this thing to a cooperative and let the cooperative produce the food, create a link on the growth. Now you are giving it to someone who doesn't even smell the soap. So I think the key part, let's play our role in all sectors, as the DP you have said. It's going to be easy to contribute to the growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that call to action to BMF. And I'd just like to ask you a question, John. One of the things I noticed in the SONA was not just discouraging entrepreneurship in a sense because of the structural and systemic issues that we've discussed, but now we have the business licensing on micro enterprises, which is going to happen. And we saw the whole xenophobia around it. We saw the poisoning of the children and the deaths last year. This is going to be a major stumbling block for our people who are unemployed, who have no other option but to resort to micro-entrepreneurship. How do you think this is going to impact? And just leading on to what this gentleman is saying, these micro-entrepreneurs need support, they need mentorship, they need funding, but they're not getting it. Instead, they're getting more pushback from government. So how can we as a society address this?
Okay, big questions. I mean, entrepreneurship's a fascinating area. You've got micro enterprises and small enterprises and medium enterprises. And if one is taking quite a strategic view of it, you think, well, how does most wealth get into the economy and how do most people get employed? And while you can work, again, systemically on these critical things, there's a reason why they're putting licensing in. And the reason is to create some regularity in the system, et cetera, et cetera. There is a reason. I'm not defending the reason. I'm just saying there is a rationale for it. They're not entirely mad. Okay, all right? But there are always unintended consequences as well, or maybe deliberate consequences. What I would say is that there was a study done of some Togolese women entrepreneurs, and half of them were taught entrepreneurship skills, and the other half were taught, and they were like that level, the other half were taught psychological resilience skills. Now, guess which one of those groups did better? Absolutely. The psychological resilience, they flew. So while we're asking for entrepreneurship teaching, that's a complicated thing. There's another study done by a woman called Sarah Saraswati of multiple billionaires, all of whom had to have listed a company and had several failures in their life, catastrophic failures. And she said, what was the thing that made you successful? And it wasn't like I used to teach in the incubator I ran in New Zealand, a classic entrepreneurship program. It wasn't. It was the bird in the hand principle. Use the resources you've got here rather than fantasizing about something else. Affordable loss. Don't worry about the profit. How much can I lose in this project without going bust? run with that rather, the pilot in a plane, rather than thinking that there's a destiny for you carved by the environment. Where do I want to go and how am I going to get there? The lemonade principle, when things go wrong, make lemonade, etc. And these were the principles that eventually she drew out from these very, really important entrepreneurs. So going back to the micro-enterprise, yes, there may be a limit, but how do you actually create the systemic capabilities for people to grow and proper enterprises? And here's another thought. If you took a lot of young entrepreneurs where the problem is, people leaving school wanting to be entrepreneurs, you've got many of those have not had any access to decent education because the schools weren't great. Many of them, 5 out of 100 school starters in this country get a degree within 5 years of leaving school. 5 out of 100. Now that's mad again. We should be looking at 70 should get at least a qualification. The TVETs have collapsed, so they're not learning how to use practical things to do with their hands. We've got to change this. It's no good spouting statistics. So what happens is we end up with building enterprises where these young people out of school, now you're suddenly asking them to run sophisticated businesses without any skills. Well, now we know that there's a process of failure that seasons entrepreneurs. So guess who make the best entrepreneurs? Young people or middle-aged people? Well, it's the middle-aged people, much higher success rate. So why don't you become entrepreneurs? Because you're going to start businesses that are going to be more successful. You're going to create employment. You're going to have less failures. Bet on yourself. Don't just sit in the comfort of whatever employment it is. Have a go. Because you will then not only start a business that's more likely successful, you will mentor and teach people with your years and years of experience how to be a successful entrepreneur. And you will become successful. It's a gamble. You've got more to lose when you're in your middle age, but you've got more likelihood of success. We never talk of these sort of dynamics. We just look at what's going to happen. These kids coming out, they don't have a chance to really succeed. We've got to surround them with capability, educate them, support them entrepreneurially, support the YES program and all the other things that we do. 10% of our staff at any one time are from the YES program, and we mostly get them from the Maharishi Institute, which are phenomenal. So the question there is less about what is the abstract thing we can do, what are the risks we're all going to have to take if we're going to make the change happen? Because you talked about having to sacrifice, and there's no magic bullet out of policy or government's going to sort this. It's just us. And personally, I believe we can do it. And I hugely believe in South African talent, because for 30 years I've been working with it. You can tell I'm British originally. I'm not going anywhere unless you throw me out. I love this place, and I love the people, and they're so capable. So we can make it work. And that's what I think. It's not a neat little package. It's just rubbing, trying, and pushing, and experimenting. But at the heart is belief in who we are and what we can make. That's how I see it, anyway.
So much. I just want to contribute to two points on this psychological resilience issue, because I think it's very important. Because in essence, if you've not had a chance to go and study business school or business education program, the starting point is family businesses. One of the key things that actually has been the greatest model, by the way, of white community in South Africa is the fact that they've built this economy on the back of agricultural sector. And they've been the difference is that we don't even know what the fights that they have when they're indoors. But when they face the world, they face the world in unison. But at the heart of it, which is, I think that's what, I'll call you Prof for tonight, if you don't mind, right?
I don't mind.
So one of the things, for instance, they do is very early, they introduce children to business resilience, corporate culture. I mean, just simple joke that all of us as Africans, that in fact, Black people, I must make it for you to remind you. Tina, we don't have time. Black people don't have time. So I'll say to you, I'll see you in the morning, right? And my morning is between 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock. But when you run a business, a minute count. So now you can think about what are the two things that happen. So if you're expecting a public sector person to send you an email, the person will say, I'll send you an email in the morning. And you have to run a business now. You have to deliver these bottles, right? And a staff member from SIFTA needs to release this 100,000 for you to go and buy. And the message was in the morning. And what do you do with your clients? Can you see, for instance, and it's sometimes because really, also in our defense, that we don't know corporate culture, right? We've not been exposed into building family business. And the sad thing is that the public sector system has also, but kind of like, because of corruption. So if you're saying, I'm coming in with my 2 daughters and my 2 cousins, like, hey, corruption, you know, you can't be running a business. And in fact, if you think about German economy, at the heart of Germany's economy resilience, it's 2 things. It's family businesses and cooperatives, which are built by families, a Mark family, a John family, a James family, and they decide to set up a cooperative. And when the European economy was in crisis, it's Germany who actually extended an olive branch to almost 5 countries, you know, Portugal, Spain, but still on the back of actually almost above 50% of cooperatives who are running businesses, who of course over time have then transformed into a lot more bigger conglomerates. But the values of their businesses are still based on cooperatives principle. So we have an opportunity, and I think the Prof, what he says, we have an opportunity. We must really, after tonight, we must think about a cousin who's unemployed, who might actually give you a headache, but you must think, I have to work with. A nephew who's young, who's likely to have dropped out of school, but also sharp, because what that does is that it helps us to pay attention to family capabilities, right? And capabilities that are not defined by the type of certificates, but you can see this one is strong in this area, is my cousin. This one is my niece, strong in this one, but they're struggling with school. They bunk school, they always come up with stories. But then when you then get them into a family community, say, listen, there's no bakery here. I mean, for instance, by the way, do you know that we buy our bread from 4 bakery companies, right? Agricultural sector in this country is dominated by 8 firms, vertically integrated. Right? Now, it's worse now, what we're doing now as Black people, we're buying all these nice houses in the cities with not a single garden. You're out of your house, you can't even do a row of spinach. Right. You know, you can't even do a row of potatoes. You can't even do absolutely. So in essence, and 85% of South Africans, before they eat, they go into a supermarket. So we've really also disempowered ourselves. And I think, I don't know if you actually have reflected in my input. I mean, I've not spoken about post-SONA, by the way. I've spoken about us. Because we have to take responsibility, right? Because, and that's why we're members of BMF, is that part of that social leadership we must show is that society has contributed in us by being educated. How does society draw its dividends from us? And when it draws these dividends, it's the small steps. It's that community, it's that family organization. In December, what do we do when we sit together, right? Our step here speaks about family. But what conversations do we have in our families about really starting things? And by the way, I know that sometimes we're financially vulnerable because you're worried, if I withdraw this 100,000 and it doesn't come back as 150,000, what will I do? It comes with that risk. Because ultimately there'll be 2 or 3 young nieces and nephews who says, yo, auntie or my sister, thank you so much for that opportunity. Because even though it actually, the business did not come off the ground, but there's something that I've learned. So we also need to really think about how to stretch ourselves beyond just seeing ourselves as workers, executives, earning lovely salaries and with beautiful homes. But what is it because that family organization, that family economic organization will have massive multiplier effects in the medium to long term. Because what it does is that it contributes into longitudinal thinking in society instead of short-termism, unto which we're confronted with, which is associated with public governance and public planning.
Thank you.
Sorry, mine is going to be very short. I'm just representing the online community. My name is Mamudi Se. I think it's more of a comment than a question, but perhaps the panel can respond. It's in and around the water crisis and the committee that's been formed on responding to the water crisis, affecting the mining industry in particular, and how that affects job security. So if any of the panelists can please respond to whether you think or don't think that it will work? I know the budget speech is tomorrow, but perhaps you have some comments around it. I can't pronounce your name, Mr. Poganpu, I think, online. Thank you.
Well, I can comment. Can I comment briefly on that?
Yeah.
On the water, I mean, the water crisis is not for a lack of water. You see how much rain we got. It's for a lack of infrastructure. It's a lack of servicing. And it goes back to what we have allowed to happen. You know, we think corruption is some vague thing. Corruption is pure criminality. And now it is organized crime. And the president said that. He said it's a national crisis. So this is a really, really hard one for us to grapple with. You know, and it affects everybody. It affects all of our kids. So unless we see it as not a societal problem or not to do with a part of the South African community, it's a systemic problem of people who've decided to enrich themselves in a highly organized fashion to take the money that should be building the pipes so that this happens. And it doesn't happen for 4 or 5 or 10 years, but it happens. And it's still carrying on. So we have to make a decision about what we stand for. Are we going to stand for people doing that around us, because we'll never get out of where we are if we do? Or are we going to stand up against it? And are we going to stand up together for the building a better South Africa for all our futures? And that can be the only way forward. And so the issue goes absolutely down, not just to poor governance, but sheer criminality. And in my view, we have to call it what it is and act appropriately, with consequences not for the foot soldiers, but the people who lead it, to make sure that we hold people accountable properly. Now, none of us want to do this because, you know, it's so hard and it's fearful and it's scary, and we worry for our own safety if we do it. But we won't get out of it unless we do it. And that's my true belief.
So you've been asked a question,
Yeah.
friends. Are you going to stand for it? Can I hear by applause if you are or you're not? Are you going to stand for it? 56 out of 257 municipalities have criminal investigations against them.
20% of our 7.5 to 8 trillion revenue, 10% is sort of just for crime, and probably another through organized crime and corruption, criminality, and the efficiencies to come. 20 out of every 100 rand is loss, and that will pay for our kids and for entrepreneurship and for building the country.
So are we going to start holding our policymakers to account? You sound pretty silent right now. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah. It's hard. You know, we don't want to, you know.
I've actually got a comment
Or you don't believe it's true.
on what Sister Lisa was saying about you spoke about families and businesses and stuff like that. And I think the comment that I had that came out from what you were talking about was what we value in terms of education. When we educate our children, are we educating them for the problems that South Africa has? We've placed a lot of importance on serious academic education as the key, and there is a place for that. I want to say that there's also a need for the kind of skills that are really that really address the problems that we have as a country. We were talking about the licensing of micro entrepreneurs, specifically around, you know, making sure that the food programs are happening in schools. Why are we not growing vegetables in schools and teaching children how to grow their own food as part of the curriculum? Why haven't we gone back to the skills such as sewing as a skill? Because we're busy importing clothing when we could make it ourselves. The shortage of artisans is part of the reason why we see the breakdown of infrastructure, because those skills are dying out in the economy, and then we have to hire people from other countries who have the skills. So when we talk about empowering people, our education system is not addressing the real problems that South Africa has in terms of the lack of artisans, lack of farmers, lack of the textile industry in the country. That's what we should also be looking at teaching as we go ahead and teach the lawyers, the doctors, the teachers, the engineers. Because that's how we can balance a lot of some of the problems we see in the country out and stop relying on bringing that talent into the country. That's just my comment.
Thank you so much. Lady in the red, I have seen you and we have, yes, yes. And colleagues, I'd like us to think about, because we've been hearing a lot of comments. Sis Pelisa, you've also mentioned home gardening. And I wonder if you see a pattern emerging here. I can see one, is we're trying to become autonomous as citizens in this country. We're trying to find every way of navigating so we don't need to rely on the government. And I'd like to ask you a question, and you can answer it later or now or whenever, but is this going to be sustainable if we want to change our country? And I'd like to go back to that gentleman, but it's something we can maybe bring into our closing remarks.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sello Abel, not Sello Abel. So I'm going to comment on 2 points. Ne? The first one is economic transformation, which you mentioned, Ms. Pelisa. And then the second one is quality of education, which the MC mentioned. Ne? Ms. Pelisa, you were asking the so-called middle class to run with economic transformation. We are already carrying a lot. We pay 2 taxes. The first one is black tax, which you spoke about, caring our sisters and the like and brothers. And then the second one is the tax that we pay to carry the country, which is growing smaller. And then what we are paying for is becoming bigger. For example, government, after COVID, government should have converted the 350s or the 370s into funding for entrepreneurs so that they can create real jobs instead of paying the 370s because they're not sustainable. And then we just spoke about the issue of water leaks. We should be hiring plumbers to fix all of them, then we can solve the problem of water crisis, for example. We've been talking about the Moloto Road train. Nothing is happening. We can create a lot of jobs by building that train. And then the second point is about quality of education. The reason why we produce poor quality is because of the measure that we have. We are measuring based on high pass rate. Principals are chasing the numbers. Okay. They are not chasing quality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No one in the head? Okay. All right.
Is she look? Oh, can I? May I? Okay, thank you. My name is Lerato Mom, but those who like me call me Construction Bay. I'm an enthusiast of anything transformation, but I also host a podcast that focuses on, well, it's a built environment transformation toolkit. But I wanted to speak to, I hate surface level conversation when it comes to transformation. I think it's a danger to what maybe this particular sitting wants to achieve. And I say this in the sense that also when we analyze or criticize the SONA or the past 30-year SONAs that have been delivered by the different presidents, is that in many instances, we don't even analyze it from that point of view. I believe the biggest problem as South Africans is that we don't understand transformation from the same point of view, or we don't internalize it the same way. And that's why I think Dr. Tabea, when she was talking of prosperity, she said it meant different things to different people, and it shouldn't be. Now, prosperity for South Africans, in essence, we should be able at this particular point to envision the same thing. We must be able to say, that's what we're working towards, and this is what we're working towards. And when we do that, we are then able to say when certain contributions are made, different reforms such as Operation Vulindlela and so forth, we're able to say, does this speak to the things that we want for Black South Africans in essence? So I just wanted to start off by that. But second to that is that another big problem is when we start speaking of South African problems as if they are personal instead of systematic. Because in actual fact, where we find ourselves or the status quo is more systematic than it is personal. A child not having, I like this particular example, a child not having access to sanitary towels and being unable to go to school is a systematic issue. Poverty in itself is more systematic than it is personal. So it also becomes quite difficult to contribute in conversation once we start making them personal. And this is not to say when I've I've taken into account and considered everything that everyone has said here. And my biggest fear in majority of the people who made contribution was that it was coming from a personal, unscientific point of view. And I think that's also quite, it's difficult to say we understand our problems the way that we should. We are so, what do they call it? We are high above where we should actually be. We are not in touch with the core issues. And one of those is if we don't, for instance, speak to the moral fiber of our society, then obviously whether the education system works or doesn't work, it's always going to produce the same rot. And that's where we should be looking. That's what we should be talking to. The transformation is not also only just in the essence of building roads or people receiving water. It also speaks to my neighbor being able to take care of my child because the taxi got stuck and I'm running late from work before the child could get home. Or my child being safe in the streets and not going to go missing. So we have those challenges that we so in many instances speak about them. But I can believe that one of the, I think Sis Pelisa spoke to the fact that our constitution its fiber sticks to issues around equity and equality. It is embedded in the language within the constitution throughout. There is no trace of it. However, the constitution has not translated into what it's meant to translate to in the life of South Africans themselves. And I have no answer to how that gap can be bridged. However, I don't think we'll ever achieve true transformation if we don't speak to our mental state and how we understand our problems and or how we interpret them. I have a lot to say, but not so that everyone gets a chance to speak. I'm just gonna stop there. Thank you.
May I come in and just respond? So I want to respond to the common vision issue as well as the comments that he's made. I want to share a story of what happened when I went to Japan. I got onto this program where we went to study how they run business and how, you know, they do things. And a story is told about what happened when the war ended. At the end of the war, 2 engineers stood up and gave a vision to the country. And everybody followed. It was not politicians. It was 2 individuals that put together a strat plan that was going to carry the country. And it did. Japan became one of the most dominant economies out of that. Yeah. So here's what they did to your question or your comment. They made a decision that it doesn't matter what job you do, we're all going to earn the same. Hello? Yeah. Black middle class. We're all going to earn the same, whether you're a medical doctor, you're a plumber, you're a domestic worker, it doesn't matter what you are. We're all going to earn the same until we get to a point where our country is viable enough to start increasing salaries and pitching salaries where they should be pitched. So talking to a common vision, that was a common vision. But the problem is that we've become so individualistic. You know, if you go to the rural areas, to this day, it still happens. Yeah. If I'm building my house, on the day that I start celebrating putting a fence around my house, somebody comes with a mop, somebody comes with a garafo, different things. It's a sense of a common vision that they have. And I think when we start talking transformation, we're not on the same page. We are just not on the same page about what transformation is and what we're willing to give up to see transformation happen. To a large extent, it's a tick box exercise where none of us have our hearts in it. And there are no values that drive transformation. Until we can drive it by values such as humanity, ubuntu, dignity, if I can eat, he should eat as well, we'll never achieve the transformation. We need to get to a place where we're going to be willing to give something in order to get something. We're going to have to give, until the children that I grew up with in Soweto can afford half of the things that I can afford.
Yeah. You know, I just want to make a contribution. Actually, on the contrary, our constitution is a common vision, right? Because it says you'll have access to equal education. So whether you are from Ngobo or you are from Guyane, you'll have access to equal education. So the key issue then we must then say, what are the instruments that are on the ground to achieve that objective, right? It says women will participate in the workplace and earn the same salary, right? That's a common vision. It says you'll have access to education, you are guaranteed food, you are guaranteed access to water. That's a common vision. So the key question we must then evaluate and then say, so what instruments did we build to make it sure that that equitable promise that is contained in our constitution actually make sure is achieved? So my brother, the point, and you're right, Astabe, we'll continue to pay the tax. But obviously you're raising an important point about, because we need to break down this double taxation, né? Which is, my sister makes the point, she says, this conversation, for us, we have to stretch it a lot more deeper, because we must then say, what are these two taxation systems represent, right? So there's one tax system that you pay, which is a public tax. It's how you contribute back to society, right? But also there's one that you tax because from your own identity, humanity, you cannot have a meal when your one does not have a meal. Right? And I do think that even, I mean, you know, we accept this concept of taxation. As Africans, we should not even call this taxation. This is a human solidarity contribution. Because we fully understand that we can, when we're born, we don't have the same capabilities. And so therefore, that's how we contribute. We lift off each other. All right, because of the conversation, and young people have drawn us into the taxation component. But when we have an opportunity, we must go deeper and say it's a human solidarity, it's a social solidarity. We know, I mean, all Africans, in fact, let me say even Black people, all of us combined, we know the WhatsApp that come through for e-wallet requests, you know, towards the month end. It's a human solidarity, and sometimes you are getting into such a high-level, intense meeting, and your sister says, I'm in a taxi station, I can't leave, I don't have money, we don't have bread. You're like, I can't even start this meeting. In between that, you think, and quickly transfer the money. It's a human solidarity, because you think about, how am I going to be chairing this meeting, sit through for 8 hours, when my sister or my aunt or my brother, or even my neighbor itself, I have nothing to eat, right? So in essence, and I think for me, again, it's a common vision. And the difference is that, how do we collaboratively really work together? So the MC makes the point is, are we trying to find out, to develop a society outside of the state? We can't. So I want to move forward and say, I think the BMF mandate is actually outdated, by the way. Now that you are 50 years, you need to move. You need to move because you are, firstly, intellectual thought leaders. So you know where society is moving to. Follow it. You can't only be linear and say transformation, 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 when there are other microcosmic issues that are actually affecting. Amongst those is, if you have successful business people, where is the mentorship program where you say, we're giving back? I'm just going to give 1 hour, 2 hours of my time as a BMF member, and that becomes a national program, right? As a BFM member, and it's known that if you go into this center and this center and this center, BF members have sacrificed their 3 hours. They are going to talk and have a conversation about, you know, can we do this? I mean, I worked with one young woman in Cape Town, and I was so hurt when I left. I kept on saying to her, where's the concept paper? She just said one day, you know, Suspense, I don't have a computer. I'm working from my phone. I was like, oh, damn. Now here's the middle class thinking in me. Because I'm assuming that when I'm working with her, she's just supposed to have a computer. Where is she going to have a computer from? It means that if I'm committed to work with her, I need to buy a computer. I must resource that. And part of resourcing, in fact, I'm planting a seed that tomorrow, what I'm doing to her, she must be able to do it to somebody else. That's a common vision. It's a common vision that is embedded on Ubuntu. But all we're doing is that we're allowing ourselves to really forget what we know and all of a sudden take on new values. I think the second issue around where BMF needs to also really position itself is in these post-dialogue conversations. And I like the church, she said, we will do some of the research program, but they must be practical. You know, South Africans are tired of conversations. If you call them for meeting today, for example, like, we don't have time. But practically, what should I be taking out of this meeting? So meaning that there must be a very concrete collaboration program between BMF, private sector, and government. How do we contribute to make it sure that so we'll say, if, for example, the entrepreneurship one is one of the most, you know, it's right in our face because some of us here work in supply chains, for instance. You know, how should people, I mean, a lot of Black people don't even know how to price a product because they've never been exposed. They don't know how to price their time, you know? They don't know how to even price, you know, different, they don't know the competitive issues in the sector where they're working in. Who should really be passing on that information? It's us here, right? And in the post-SONA, an announcement could be that, Mr. President, you've announced 1 or 2, 3 projects. We're announcing ourselves as partners. We want to partner and enter the fray. And this is how, and that's what structural transformation is about. And then the second one, say private sector, we're raising our hand. Our economy, the productive capabilities on the decline. We're raising our hand. We are going to get few people who have different skills to produce different things to get into the room. We want private sector collaboration in this sector, and this sector will pilot it, right? And part of it is that you know that partly you might have to give that time for free, but also at the same time and say development finance institutions or companies that have the corporate social responsibility, because it's already de-risked fund corporate social responsibility, come into the party, you know, give us, even if it's 1 or 2 million to support this program and see through, right? So I think as you celebrate 50 years, review your mandate. It's outdated. You are soon going to be irrelevant because if you are relevant, by the way, this room should have been packed. This room, we should impact, we should even ask as panelists saying, oh, yes, the chair, ma'am, because, you know, the room is full. So please think about that.
But I think the intention of the evening was not to put BMF in the hot seat, but President Ramaphosa on the hot seat. And I just need to ask our host, we have gone over the time limit. What is our cutoff, sir?
I'm going to ask the experts at the back, Mamo, are we okay for time for a bit longer?
We need to close. But we do have some comments. If I can just ask our final round of just comments, please, and then we can close because we don't want to marginalize anyone. We have some burning comments. DP, can we come to you last?
Yes.
To give those who didn't get an opportunity to speak. So we have 1, 2, any on this side? And the red jacket. And then we have DP, and then we have our managing director who's going to close.
Yes.
Yeah, so the online people want to go as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to be quick. It's a comment, but also an invitation for collaboration. So my name is Karishma Govender. I'm from the National Empowerment Fund. So the conversation today is very relevant, and we are fully aware of all of these challenges that have been raised, and we live with them every day. We try to find solutions every day, and we continue to, you know, invite partnerships to make these a practical reality. And Sis Pilisa and I met at the P20 Women's Parliament, and I think the panel is just inspirational. So I'm really inspired to do more. So I've been with the National Empowerment Fund for about 18 years. It's a long time. So we live and breathe transformation. And it is a struggle when you're in government trying to resolve problems and you also yourself have budgetary constraints, financial constraints. You want to do more, you don't have the money to do it. But there's a lot of solutions that we try to find because we are so cash constrained to solve the problems without necessarily having the money in our own bank accounts right now and right here. So in as much as we can also do direct lending, but we form partnerships to do things like what was suggested just now. And the reason I wanted to come in was because when we look at some of the issues, they're not cash issues. They're issues around this concept of mentorship. I don't want us to take it lightly and say, oh, mentorship, no. I think I've looked into this issue, and what I observe from my standpoint is that you see that the Jewish community and the Muslim community have done this really well. They have the sense of community amongst the entire population of people, and they go out of their way to not only groom the next generation to take over whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a family business, but they groom them with the right skills for them to be successful in whatever they do. But they also look to the community and say, this person's child needs me to assist with something, I will do it. It doesn't have to be your own child, it doesn't have to be someone that you know, but because they are from your community, you take the time and you formally groom them from the time they are little until they are actually, successful. And they always have the access to the network that you have created for them, the people in your network. And that value is really priceless. And then the other thing I realized that's probably missing in transformation and in Black business is the issue of not just collaboration, but creating bigger and more formidable entities. So I did a recent advocacy project where we were looking at the legal sector, because that's where I come from originally. And we were looking at the lack of transformation in the legal sector and why, 78% of senior managers or senior partners in big law firms are white male. And 30 years down the line, nothing much has changed. Black people are not making it into equity level partnerships in the legal sector. So the question that I asked was also, why is it that there are no big Black law firms? Why haven't they merged and actually formed significant firms with various various departments? And we can actually say to them, you've now formed a competitor to the big firms, because we are happy to support you as well as the NEF. We go out of our way to support Black companies and Black firms. And even from within the fraternity, the feedback was that it just seems like people want their name on the door, even if the door is smaller. But people don't want to give away the name on the door in exchange for something bigger that's going to make a bigger impact. This is coming from within the profession. And they were saying, every time a firm has tried to merge, a Black firm has tried to merge with another one, it's failed because of personality clashes and fights between them. The principle then applies to business in general. We're not seeing Black conglomerates, we're not seeing businesses competing with the real big business in South Africa. Big business is not transformed. And I think this culture of mentorship, of grooming, of cooperation and collaboration, we need to be deliberate and actually do it. We need to make deals, merge, have a bigger pie as opposed to a big piece of a small pie. And I think in every single one of us sitting here, we need to ask ourselves, what contribution are we going to make to actually implementing that? Which we are trying to do, as NEF, but we are only one organization. The thinking has to really change to say the prosperity must flow through, but we need to drive it, because the honest truth is no one is going to transform the country except for those of us that want transformation, that are previously excluded from the economy. And if we're hoping that it's going to come from big business, or if it's going to come from, people that don't really need it, it's really not. I think we must just stop expecting also that government will solve all the problems, or that big business is going to come in and throw money at things. It has to start on a grassroots level from us. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Masarutu Shai. I'm a transformation activist. I think Sis Pelisa mentioned this, it pains me so much that 30 years on, we're still speaking about the same issues around grassroots levels. And we need to look at the function of what a government is for. There's been an advent of centralization of power. There were NAFCOCs that were very effective in townships. I'm a child of a general dealer. It was big at the time. I knew every single Black business person in my township at that time, prosperous in their ways. Obviously, we've seen the advent of that. They were rolled away, essentially, because of, obviously, geopolitical matters. People came in and outpriced them as they were. What was the role of government at that? And malls, perfect example of that. In our townships, we've got malls now. Are we perceiving that as development? And it's not, unfortunately, because you're still speaking to people that are marginalized within the economies that are coming in. So you are bringing more people into the township, big businesses entering now, the small phrase that are in the township. So what is the function of government? And I think the issue that we're talking about, what is still the relevance of, these spheres of government and us wanting to have a parallel system that speaks to separatism when it comes to citizens having their own faith. We can't. Everybody has a role to play in systems. There's government, there's public sector, there's private sector. And why I'm saying this as well is the decline, actually, it's heartbreaking to see the decline of active citizenry. Like you said, this room should be full of people, but our people have lost hope and have lost trust in the systems that are there. The Black intelligentsia that we spoke about, that is BMF. The models need to change. Are we speaking to societal issues that we have? Are we still speaking to the relevant issues that we face as a new generation as well, as much as the previous generations, the risks in the systems and that we find? So for me, I don't think we lack the systems that are there. I think the centralization of power due to that government as well has been an issue over time. And I think we need to speak to that, because power to the people, as we know it, is not as it was. It's actually got much worse in the 30 years than it was at 94. So I think that's a pattern of discussion we need to mule on our way home. Thanks.
Okay. We have our last comment from
last one.
DP, and then we have our Managing Director, Mr. Mandi Ndlovu, who will present the closing remarks for the evening.
I think to close off, I would like to emphasize on how we elect these leaders that we are talking about, because it's quite important. There's a saying that says you cannot solve the problem with the same mentality that created it. We vote for these councillors, we vote for these mayors. You are taking a person that has never managed 100 rand and you make them a councillor. You make them a president. From 300 rand, they move to a national fiscus of billions. What are you expecting? So transformation starts with us. Let us change. What do we want from the leaders? If we knew what we want, nobody will stand there and put their face on the ballot paper if they know they can't deliver, because they will know they'll be held accountable. But we don't know what we want as the people. Nelson Mandela is gone. He was a great leader. Now we need to know, what is it that we want as the people? Otherwise, we're going to keep getting people that don't even know the difference between an impala and a springbok as leaders. But we put them there, guys. So if we want to change our transformation, let us look at what is it that we want from a leader. For all of us here that are managers, we know that you are only as good as your CV. So if that person has never built a business, this person does not have values, why are you putting them in positions of power? Your main street, your councillor, this person has never done anything with themselves, but you want them to manage the whole of Midrand. What are you expecting? To have water? No, guys, let's be realistic. So let's change our thinking. Let's be very, very careful on what we want as leaders, so that they can know that when I put my hand up and I say I'm going to lead, I'll be able to deliver. Otherwise, I must know that I won't even finish a term, I'll be gone. But if we keep sitting back and saying it's my uncle, it's my aunt, yeah, I'll also benefit, then I'm also partaking in it. And then just to close off, the transformation that everybody's all talking about here, which is in essence what BMF is about, it starts with you. We've all been speaking about transformation policies and what each one of us here in the room has gotten an opportunity because of the opportunity because we are Black. But what did you do about it? You come here and you stand here and you point fingers and say, hey, the municipal people, they don't work. But what are you doing about it? You get that position unqualified. You get it because you are a woman. Once you get in there, go to school, empower yourself, join the BMF, surround yourself with people that will empower you and make a difference. Let us go away from this whole pointing fingers and expecting things, but we don't point fingers at ourselves. Starts with you, change the way you think, show up at work, let your morning, be inspirational, be true, have a true value system. Don't expect the government to give you a value system. They don't have themselves. We are a rainbow nation, our values are distorted. We are putting all values together. Have your own individual value system as a person. Wake up and make that difference. Otherwise, we'll be here next year and the following year speaking of the same thing and the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our fantastic panelists, a round of applause.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm not going to say anything because time is out. I'm just going to say thank you. So, Prof. John, thank you very much for your time. Thank you to Henley and our relationship. It's getting deeper and deeper, and we truly appreciate the partnership with Henley as well. We released a report last week, by the way. So you can find it on the BMF website. I'm sure you can also find it on the Henley website. There's been lots of communication about it. So please find it. It's there for you to review and also share your input with us. Dr. Commissioner, thank you very much, Commissioner. You did a great job with the commission as well. We truly appreciate your contribution to the country as well. Yes, you can give a round of applause. And I know next time when we call you, you'll come again because BMF is home. Sis Pelisa, thank you very much. There's much I can say about you, but we really appreciate your input and your contribution. And every time we call, you're always there as well. So we'll call again because there's still much to unpack. There's still much to do and to build this great country that we know it's possible to do so. So thank you very much. Dr. Siobhan, thank you very much for a job well done. Please give a round of applause. Thank you very much, and the great work we're doing with the PRC, where we continue to move from strength to strength. I know we've taken some notes, and let's still sit down and see what else we can do as well with Henley Business School. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. DP, may you please come forward so we can hand over the gifts. I know the cameraman has left because he keeps time. So can we then take from our phones, and then we take it from there? All right.
If you are not a BMF member, please, our staff members are here. Please join us before you call us irrelevant. Join us.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. You don't want to spend your talent. You will not pay the invoice. You will not pay. You don't get invoice from us.
Can we take a picture? Can we take a picture?